The moment it happened, almost no one noticed. A quiet NASA live stream, running in the background of thousands of laptops, phones, tiny windows tucked in browser tabs across the world, suddenly stuttered. A single frame froze. A faint flicker passed through the telemetry box. Numbers trembled, and then the camera sharpened, revealing something that should not have been there. Not dust, not debris, not anything a natural object drifting through the solar system could produce. A shape, a glow, a geometry emerging from the blue haze of 3I ATLAs. It lasted 3.7 seconds, just long enough for screenshots, long enough for amateur astronomers to gasp, long enough for NASA watching in real time to panic. And then, the feed was terminated. Not paused, not lost. Manually cut. Immediately, a black title card appeared. Signal acquisition interrupted. Please stand by. Except the signal never returned. NASA deleted the link. DSN dashboards switched the object to a restricted status tag normally reserved for classified spacecraft. Ground telescopes pivoted away as if on command. Something about that final frame, something inside it, was too dangerous for the world to see. You're about to hear what that frame contained. But before that, you need the full picture. Because Atlas wasn't just an interstellar visitor. It was a question mark drifting toward the Sunday. Atlas was different from the moment it was found. July 1st, 2025. Child's Survey Telescope picked up an elongated object, cutting across the starfield at an impossible angle, not passing through the solar system, but diving into it. Everything about it was wrong. Its origin point, older than our sun, a stellar neighborhood far beyond local space. Its coma, not chaotic dust, but internal striations and filaments that looked aligned, almost structural. Its glow, not white, not green, but electric blue, a color that demanded temperatures no comet could survive. And the ratios of iron and nickel inside, not unfamiliar, WRONG. As if the material had been processed. But the first real alarm came from Webb. When JWST pointed its near-spec array at Atlas, astronomers expected typical comet signatures. Instead, they got a 348,000 kilometers wide CO2 coma, nearly the distance from Earth to the Moon. Then deeper data revealed something far stranger: heat, coming from the inside. Not sunlight warming the surface, but stable internal hotspots arranged in repeating geometries. Natural comets do not maintain geometric thermal patterns. They crack, they flare, they rotate unpredictably. But Atlas held its heat like a machine. Something was operating inside it. When NASA saw those readings, they quietly upgraded the livestream resolution. Internal memos instructed analysts to flag internal structural anomalies, the kind of directive used to monitor spacecraft, not ice. People began calling it the object. No one was comfortable calling it a comet anymore. And then the velocity broke the model. Atlas wasn't slowing as it approached perihelion. It was speeding up, smoothly, predictably, almost deliberately. A natural explanation existed: gas jets from sublimation. But Atlas wasn't venting randomly. Its acceleration matched its thermal hotspots with eerie precision, 94 km, day squared. Impossible without guidance. Then came the mass loss readings, rising from 330 kilograms per second to nearly 2 million kg in a matter of weeks. To sublimate naturally at that rate, ATLS needed a surface area 16 times larger than its measured size. Only one explanation fit the numbers. ATLS had broken into 16 pieces, not 14, not 19, exactly 16, each fragment contributing perfectly to the missing surface area, as if the breakup was a planned deployment. Scientists panicked quietly. Forums panicked loudly. NASA stayed silent. And that's when observers started asking the question: why is it glowing blue? Blue pulses, blue surges, blue rhythm every 9.4 minutes, as if responding to some internal cycle. And the hotter the pulses, the bluer the glow. Not sunlight. Internal energy. Some people joked it looked like a machine powering up, except no one was joking by November. Because during a routine broadcast, Atlas brightened. Two thin, perfect jets erupted from the nucleus, symmetrical, parallel, aligned at matching angles. Not chaotic like natural jets. Not smeared by rotation. Not random. Engineered. People clipped the footage. NASA saw it, and 2 minutes later, the live stream blackout began. If you're still listening, breathe. Part 2 is where everything escalates. The photographic evidence, the 7 geometric jets, the activation event, and the last frame NASA never wanted the world to reconstruct. If this story keeps you curious, stay with me. There's more. Much more. What happened next didn't come from NASA. It came from two men working quietly in the English countryside, Michael Butner and Frank Nebling. They weren't part of any space agency. They didn't have a billion-dollar telescope, just a highly sensitive ground-based network designed to track small, fast objects. On the night of November 9th, just hours before NASA terminated the public feed, they captured 3 images that would ignite the largest scientific panic since Oumuamua. The first image showed something relatively tame, at least compared to what came after. A straight, narrow beam streaming toward the Sunday, not away from it toward it. An anti-tail, nearly 1 million kilometers long, razor straight. Comets can produce anti-tails occasionally, but not this straight, not this symmetrical, not this clean. It looked more like a directed stream, as if the object was emitting something at the Sunday. The second image was stranger, a columnated jet stretching 2.85 million kilometers into space. Columnated meaning narrow, tightly focused, almost laser-like. Comets do not produce jets like that. Natural jets are messy, chaotic, unstable. But Atlas's jet was straight enough to look computer-generated. Butner and Nebling thought they'd made a processing mistake. They recalibrated, rechecked, restacked. The jet remained. And then came the third image. The one NASA never acknowledged. The one that forced the livestream into blackout. 7 jets, 7 radiating from the fragment nucleus in a geometric pattern. Evenly spaced. Consistent angles, perfect symmetry, not one pixel of randomness. A European astrophotographer posted the first reaction. This isn't fracturing. This looks like thruster alignment. Within minutes, engineered jets trended across astronomy forums. NASA maintained absolute silence. ESA refused interviews. Harvard's team answered questions with a single phrase: data under review. But the images kept spreading. Hundreds of versions. Dozens of independent confirmations. 7 jets. Matching geometry. Matching intensity. Matching alignment. Not sublimation. Actuation. And then, the fragments began to behave like no debris cloud ever recorded. When Atlas split into 16 pieces, astronomers expected chaos, tumbling, collisions, unpredictable drift. Instead, the fragments fell into a formation, a radial array evenly spaced like the petals of a flower, each fragment producing the same blue jets, each fragment maintaining orientation, each fragment accelerating, and here's the disturbing part: each fragment accelerating at a rate proportional to its mass. Natural debris does not do that. Something coordinating 16 objects does. By November 13th, telescopes in Italy, Australia, and Chile observed faint streaks, thin blue lines connecting fragments through the dust. Not physical connections, more like alignment beams. Then something happened that chilled every researcher who saw it. Fragment L brightened a sharp, focused burst of blue. For 0.8 seconds, it emitted a columnated jet directly toward Fragment H. Fragment H responded. It nudged sideways, just a fraction. Fragment L adjusted. Fragment H corrected. Not collision behavior. Not random thrust. Communication. Through propulsion. NASA declined to comment. ESA refused every request. The Harvard group simply posted. The fragments appear to maintain non-ballistic motion. Non-ballistic meaning not following gravity. Not passive. Not natural. Somebody or something was piloting those fragments. As Atlas drifted outward away from the sun, away from every natural heating mechanism, the blue glow should have faded, but it intensified. The jets strengthened. The internal heat increased. The fragments spread farther apart, yet maintained symmetry. Ordinary comets die near perihelion. ATLAS looked like it had just begun. And then came the blackout frame. NASA zoomed in at 21:36 UTC. At 21:37 UTC, the last clean frame appeared. Fragment B rotated into a sunlight angle that illuminated its surface cleanly, the first time the world saw one of the fragments without dust interference. 2 jets emerged from its surface perfectly parallel, perfectly mirrored, angle of 31 degrees, thickness identical to within photographic error. As the fragment rotated, the jets compensated bending to maintain direction like gimbaled nozzles. Not cracks, not outgassing, not natural, engineered. Then, in a moment burned into the screenshots, fragment B pulsed. Not a flare, not a reflection, a pulse. Blue, internal. Deliberate. Viewers captured the frame instantly. Hundreds of screenshots, dozens of angles. NASA saw it too. And right as the outline sharpened, right as the surface geometry became unmistakably smooth, curved, structured, the screen turned black. Not a glitch, not a data dropout. A manual cut. NASA terminated the feed. They locked the stream archive, deleted the URL, shifted DSN tracking to internal only, refused every press question. Reddit and Discord reconstructed the frame using over 400 submissions. The composite revealed a smooth, curved object, two perfectly mirrored blue jets, a faint internal glow. No debris, no cracks, no ice, no irregular shadowing. Not a comet fragment. Something manufactured. Something that had been dormant for millions, maybe billions of years. Something that had just activated at perihelion. But the most unsettling part, NASA knew the instant it happened, and they shut the curtains before the world could see the next frame. NASA thought the blackout would calm things down. It didn't. It did the opposite, because once the final frame began circulating, sharpened, enhanced, stitched together across 400 screenshots, the world had a problem. There was now mathematical evidence that Atlas was not dying. It was following a sequence. And the first scientist brave enough to say it publicly was Avi Loeb. Loeb had been following Atlas quietly, had noticed the acceleration pattern, had noticed the internal heat inconsistencies. But the moment the 16 fragments appeared, he began running numbers backwards, reconstructing the sequence like a crime scene. When he finished, he released a calm, surgical paper that sliced straight through every natural explanation. No drama, no clickbait, no sensationalism, just math and a sentence that sent shockwaves around the world. 3I, Atlas's fragmentation may represent a controlled mechanism. Loeb listed 7 anomalies that natural physics simply cannot account for. Smooth acceleration without force. Comets accelerate due to solar gravity, but Atlas gained speed non-linearly as if guided. Perfect fragmentation into 16 pieces, not approximate. Exact. No dust cloud, no chaos, no shrapnel. Symmetrical mass distribution. All fragments sized precisely to satisfy the earlier sublimation math. Directional jets, not random vents, but thrust-like emissions with consistent angles. Sustained collimated beams, jet structure, stable, narrow, coherent, impossible in natural outgassing. Internal heat generation, thermal zones unconnected to sunlight, but connected to jet timing. Blue emission pulses. Too hot for any cometary material to survive. Yet Atlas remained stable. And then he wrote the line NASA absolutely did not want circulating. If natural sublimation cannot account for the observed acceleration, technological thrusters provide a viable alternative. He didn't say alien, he didn't say machine, he didn't need to. The implication filled the silence. Atlas was acting like a probe, a multi-stage object. A system older than Earth, waking up at the perfect moment at the exact heating threshold near the Sunday. A deployment triggered by stellar proximity. But while Loeb's paper was spreading, something far more unsettling began happening with the fragments themselves. They weren't drifting. They were arranging. Radar pings from DSN revealed patterns. Not orbits, not natural drifts, but adjustments, tiny, precise corrections, measured in millisecond pulses of blue thrust. Each fragment maintained altitude, maintained spacing, maintained angle, like 16 drones operating under a shared program. Even stranger, the jets didn't decay as the fragments moved away from the Sunday. They intensified. The hottest readings from Webb came after perihelion, the opposite of every comet ever observed. Energy from within Atlas was increasing as solar energy decreased. NASA scientists leaked one internal phrase, AGN-like heating profile. Heating from within, not without. Then came the shocker, the discovery of synchronized pulse intervals. Each fragment emitted a soft burst of blue light every 9.4 minutes, in perfect unison, like a heartbeat or a clock cycle. Astronomers started whispering a terrifying possibility. ATLAS wasn't responding to the Sunday. Atlas was communicating with itself. signals, instructions, coordination. And just as fear began to settle in, the strangest observation of all arrived. Fragment M changed direction, just slightly, just enough to break the radial formation. Then Fragment J mirrored the shift. Then Fragment E matched both. Not drifting, not pushed, not random. A programmed maneuver. As if the system had entered its next phase. Forums exploded. What if Atlas is assembling? What if the fragments are parts of a larger structure? What if it's waiting until it's far from the sun to complete activation? NASA refused every interview request. ESA went silent. Only a few independent observatories kept releasing data almost certainly without permission. And that's when the Italian team published the most disturbing analysis yet. Fragment-to-fragment thrust vectors were showing echo patterns, faint, delayed responses, consistent with a networked system adjusting itself, like a mesh, like swarm robotics, like pieces of a machine maintaining formation. And then, on November 18th, something happened that everybody watching would remember for the rest of their lives. Fragment L emitted a 1.3-second blue flare. Fragment H responded instantly. Fragment Q adjusted. Fragment G corrected its spacing. If you chart the thrust timing, the fragments were talking to each other. Through jets, through heat, through pulses. NASA called them unusual dynamic interactions. Astronomers called them propulsion signals. Everyone else called them what they looked like: communication. Because the formation changed shape after that flare. Subtly. Deliberately. Precisely. Not into chaos, but into a new geometry. A formation no natural breakup has EVIR produced. A formation that looked less like debris and more like deployment. A system coming online. Stage by stage. Piece by piece. A machine older than humanity. Older than Earth. Maybe older than the solar system. Waking up. Part 4 continues from this exact moment: the activation geometry, the missing fragment, the hidden energy signature, and the question scientists are terrified to speak into a microphone. What is Atlas building? The moment the fragments shifted formation, the world should have been terrified. But most people never knew. Only a handful of astronomers, analysts, and late-night hobbyists watching DSN Doppler
Signal
streams
acquisition
saw the
interrupted.
pattern change in real time. At first, it looked like a minor adjustment, slight drift variations barely noticeable against the background stars. But then, one fragment broke the pattern, Fragment K. It began accelerating, not wildly, not chaotically, smoothly, purposefully, as if moving toward a new position. Within minutes, 3 more fragments responded, rotating just enough to maintain spacing, then another, then another. What emerged wasn't random. It was a new geometry. The radial flower pattern slowly unfolded into something flatter, wider like an array, a grid. 16 objects distributing themselves across tens of thousands of kilometers, until the formation looked eerily similar to something humanity had built before we phased away. The kind used in deep space antennas, large radio telescopes, networked communication systems. Except this one wasn't built by humans, and it was assembling itself in real time. NASA could not stop the data leaks. An anonymous engineer from Canberra's DSN station described it as a structure choosing its own architecture. But the most disturbing part wasn't the shape.
Flag
It was the
internal
silence.
structural anomalies.
As the fragments spread, their blue jets dimmed. Not off, just quieter. The pulses became softer, more controlled, like a system switching from awakening to operational. Then, the
Flag
heat signature
internal
changed.
structural anomalies.
For weeks, the hotspots inside each fragment had followed the same rhythm clusters, heating and cooling in predictable 9.4-minute intervals. Suddenly,
Flag
that
internal
stopped.
structural
The hotspots
anomalies.
stabilized. The internal heat evened out. The fragments were no longer warming up. They were maintaining.
The camera
Like
switches to
machines reaching
infrared.
steady-state
The
operation.
red-yellow thermal
Webb's
zone
thermal
is
readings
evenly
caught at
distributed
first
according to the
consistent
next
internal
image.
temperatures across all surviving fragments, each fragment holding a value far too high for ice, dust, or rock to endure. A comet should have been destroyed, but Atlas
The
was
mass
thriving.
loss is
If
accelerating.
this was a machine,
We've gone critical.
it had reached cruising mode. Then came the most inexplicable change of all. Signals. Faint. Rhythmic. Repeating. Not radio waves, something subtler. Something buried deep in the spectral noise. Italian observatories first reported it. This looks like encoded modulation. Harvard team, patterns repeat every 112 seconds. A Japanese amateur astronomer, The signal is not from Atlas. It's between the fragments. It wasn't broadcasting outward. It was talking to itself, coordinating, synchronizing, preparing. As the formation stabilized, astronomers noticed something else, something horrifying. The center of the array was empty. A hole, a space, a void, perfectly circular, perfectly centered, as if waiting for something. Something that wasn't there yet. A missing component. Fragment D was the first to move. It drifted slowly, aligning itself
Blue
along
pulse
the
in
edge of the
T-9
central void.
minutes.
Then Fragment H mirrored the motion. Then Fragment O completed the arc. The shape they formed looked unmistakably intentional. And rings, in engineering, mean docking systems, acceleration conduits, containment fields, or portals. The more data analysts reviewed, the less natural Atlas looked. Not just because it broke every rule of comet physics,
Feed
but because
terminate.
it seemed to be following rules of its own. Rules that made sense if Atlas was a probe shedding components, an ancient machine performing maintenance, a multi-stage device unlocking its secondary state, a derelict system waking after eons of hibernation, or something built to assemble after reaching a star. Because near stars, energy is abundant, heat is abundant, triggers are abundant, and Atlas had waited until the exact moment it skimmed the sun to begin its transformation. Then, on November 20th, the most terrifying reading of all came from Chil's Atacama Array, a low-frequency hum, a vibration so subtle it didn't appear in the optical data at first. It only emerged when multiple telescopes synchronized their measurements, a deep, resonant oscillation emanating from the center of the formation. From the empty void, something was humming before it existed. That's the moment the Italian team issued the statement that shook every researcher watching. Our models suggest Atlas is generating a field in the vacant center, an energy focus point implying the arrival
We are
or
tracking an
construction
object
of an
moving at
additional mass.
incredible
In
speeds.
simpler words, Atlas was building something.
Can you
unknown.
identify it?
But the question
Negative.
everyone began whispering quietly, nervously, anonymously was the one no public institution dared to put in writing. What arrives when the ring is complete? Fragment C then emitted the largest blue pulse ever recorded, a blinding flare that scattered dust across thousands of kilometers.
Camera follows
Every
the
other
path
fragment
plunging down
responded.
to Atlas's
A wave of
perihelion,
pulses
the
cascaded
blue light
across the
slightly
array
sweeping
like
in
a
the
ripple
direction
through
of
water, but perfectly timed. Synchronized. Coordinated. A system switching states. A machine entering phase 2. The grid tightened. The ring brightened. The void deepened. Then, for the first time, astronomers detected a distinct, repeating pattern, a signature unlike anything natural. 0.7 seconds on 1.4 seconds off. 0.7 seconds on 1.4 seconds off. A binary rhythm, a signal, a countdown. And then, the temperature in the center began to rise. Slowly, steadily, deliberately. Something
Atlas
unseen was
initiation.
forming, or arriving,
Subject
or
cannon.
awakening. Most of the world still slept peacefully, unaware. NASA knew. ESA knew. The DSN knew. And they had no idea how to stop it. Part 5 reveals what that rising temperature meant, the shape that slowly emerged, the fragment that suddenly vanished, and the final realization that forced multiple agencies to lock down every piece of Atlas data behind classified firewalls. The rising temperature in the center of the Atlas formation wasn't subtle. It was violent. The void deepened. Then, for the first time, astronomers detected a distinct, repeating pattern, a signature unlike anything natural. 0.7 seconds on 1.4 seconds off. 0.7 seconds on 1.4 seconds off. A binary rhythm, a signal, a countdown. And then, the temperature in the center began to rise. Slowly, steadily, deliberately. Something unseen was forming, or arriving, or awakening. Most of the world still slept peacefully, unaware. NASA knew, ESA knew, the DSN knew, and they had no idea how to stop it. Part 5 reveals what that rising temperature meant, the shape that slowly emerged, the fragment that suddenly vanished, and the final realization that forced multiple agencies to lock down every piece of Atlas data behind classified firewalls. The rising temperature in the center of the Atlas formation wasn't subtle. It was violent. It didn't expand outward like an explosion. It intensified inward, compressing, tightening, condensing. Heat rising toward a point that didn't yet exist. Astronomers watching it in real time said the same thing. It looks like something is forming. But forming from what? 3IATLS had mass. Yes, but the fragments weren't converging. They were holding position. If anything, they were stabilizing the outer ring. So what was forming inside the center? For days, scientists debated behind closed doors. A gravitational compression. Impossible, no mass was detected. A quantum anomaly. Too speculative and too neat. A field generator, maybe, but nothing like this had been seen in interstellar objects. The truth came from a source no one expected. A university lab in Norway equipped with an experimental low-frequency spectrometer detected something in the thermal noise. A repeating interference pattern. Consistent, cyclic, structured. Not noise, not static, not chaos. A signal. The pattern modulated itself every 4.7 minutes. Each modulation grew tighter, denser, as if encoding more information with each cycle. A graduate student made the mistake of describing it online as something building itself with thermal instructions. The post was deleted within hours, but it didn't matter, because the next day, the array changed again. One fragment went missing. Fragment F. Not destroyed, not driven, not accelerating away, gone. Removed from every telescope angle simultaneously, as if it had vanished in a blind spot the universe didn't normally have. Observers panicked. NASA denied everything. ESA claimed tracking errors. But Chile posted the truth. Fragment F had vanished. It had moved behind the central heat sphere. Except the sphere wasn't opaque. It wasn't solid. It wasn't blocking anything. Fragment F had simply stopped showing up, like it had been erased from the visible spectrum or absorbed. That was the moment several independent researchers proposed the most unsettling hypothesis to date.
Target
Atlas may be
acquired.
converting its own
Initiating
fragments
data
into a new
scan now.
structure. A machine recycling itself. A system cannibalizing its components for something more important. A probe rebuilding or reassembling a core. The idea sounded insane. Until Fragment N disappeared. Then Fragment A. Not with flares. Not with explosions. Not even with jets. They merely drifted toward the central region, faded into the heat sphere, and were gone. And each time a fragment vanished, the central temperature spiked sharply, then stabilized again at a new, higher baseline. It wasn't random. It was a construction cycle. One fragment, one spike, one stabilization. Over and over, the array wasn't just coordinating. It was feeding the center, piece by piece. And then, the first visible shape appeared. Not fully, not clearly. A silhouette. A faint curvature smoother than any comet nucleus, brighter than the fragments, illuminated not by sunlight, but by the internal thermal field. For a moment, every telescope caught the same outline. A smooth, convex surface, as if something metallic, something engineered, something impossibly ancient was beginning to emerge. A sphere, a hull, a containment shell. No one knew, but it was growing, taking shape, coming into being, one fragment at a time. NASA's silence became absolute. DSN scrubbed telemetry logs. ESA locked down their public dashboards. Only leaked screenshots told the truth. Atlas was not a comet, not a rock, not debris. It was a system. A system that had reached the sun activated, broken into functional components, and now was building something entirely new in the vacuum of space. Something it had carried dormant for eons. Something it couldn't form until it reached a star. The heat rose again. The silhouette deepened. Fragment R pulsed once, twice, and drifted inward. It faded into the sphere. A new spike. A new stabilization. A new layer forming over the emerging structure. And then, for the first time, a sound. Not audible to humans, but detectable in the radio spectrum. A low, steady oscillation. Consistent with engines warming, or reactors, or awakening. Scientists reviewing the signature said the same thing. This is not geology. This is not chemistry. This is not a comet. This is manufacturing. And still the most terrifying moment hadn't happened yet. Because within hours, every observatory tracking Atlas recorded a synchronized surge from the remaining fragments, a coordinated pulse that rippled like a heartbeat through the entire formation. A rebirth, a reset, a system initializing its final stage. And after that pulse, the central silhouette moved, not expanding, not drifting, but turning, rotating as if a structure with a surface, with geometry, with purpose, had just opened its eyes. Part 6 reveals what that structure looked like. The moment it completed its rotation, the detail no one could deny. And the reason NASA's private memo carried 5 words that leaked only once: prepare for a non-natural object. For hours, the emerging structure inside the Atlas formation remained just that, a silhouette, a shadowy heat, a suggestion of curvature, a hint of something solid forming inside the energy sphere built from sacrificed fragments. But then, something shifted: the rotation. At first, it was barely visible, a tiny angular change caught only by comparing time-stacked frames. A slight tilt, a soft pivot. But with each fragment absorbed into the central sphere, the rotation accelerated smoothly, evenly, like a gyroscope spinning up.
I am sure that this is the final solution.
Tightening around the forming object.
Let's send the results and wait for the confirmation.
And then, for the very first time, an edge appeared. A real edge, not dust, not gas, not thermal artifact. A sharp boundary line, bright, reflective, unmistakably solid. Telescopes all over the world caught it at once. Even low-budget backyard rigs picked up the gleam. Something metallic had just emerged from Atlas. A surface smooth enough to reflect starlight. A curve so perfect it looked engineered, polished, deliberate. And as the glare stabilized, the shape beneath it revealed itself. Not a sphere, not a shard, not a comet core. A hull. But a hull of what? The rotation continued, stabilizing now, falling into a consistent pattern. 0.9-degree shifts every 14 seconds. A rhythm-like calibration. Then a second boundary emerged parallel to the first. Another arc of reflective material. The 2 arcs connected, revealing the start of a geometric contour. Not random, not fractured, symmetrical. The object was symmetrical. Astronomers watching live began to realize what they were seeing. This wasn't the formation of a natural body. This was assembly. As the rotation aligned with the solar angle, the structure locked into
Ring
a new
formation
orientation,
detected.
and the entire
Anomaly
formation,
type.
the remaining
Quantum
fragments
entanglement.
responded. In perfect synchronization, the remnants of Atlas shifted their jets, not outward, not sideways, inward, toward the emerging object. 16 thrusters had become 6, then 4, then 3. Each fragment, now reduced in mass, nudged the central object's orientation by tiny amounts, applying corrective thrust like a swarm of tugboats guiding a leviathan into position. Every push was precise, every burn consistent, every correction too perfect to be natural. NASA tried to explain it as outgassing. No one believed them, because the next change shattered every remaining natural hypothesis. The central structure clicked. A literal shift, an internal reconfiguration detectable through minor changes in reflectivity, as if plates or segments inside the hull were repositioning. Some listeners described it as looking like a machine locked
This
into
is a
place.
new
As
and
the
advanced
structure
technology.
settled, its glowing shell dimmed, no longer heated chaotically but regulated, balanced, powered. The object was running.
Dust
And then
trajectory
the final boundary
prediction.
line came into view, crisp and unmistakable. A long straight section, meeting a perfect curved sweep, meeting another straight line. Not a sphere, not a shard, not a rock, a wing, not in the aerodynamic sense, but in the structural sense. A span, a fin, a contour that no comet, no asteroid, no fragment of natural material could ever produce. And as more edges emerged from the diminishing thermal haze, the outline took shape so clean and so ordered that every observer felt their breath leave their body at the same time. A vessel. Atlas had been hiding a vessel. Engineers reviewing the frames whispered the same word again and again, almost afraid to speak it. Craft. Not proof. Not speculation. Just the most logical fit for the geometry unfurling across the sky. The object continued rotating, aligning itself with the solar plane, not tumbling, not drifting, but stabilizing like a ship, adjusting its attitude relative to a star. Then, as the rotation reached equilibrium, a new pulse ripped through the formation. A deep, low electrical surge. Not visible, felt. A vibration in the radio spectrum so intense it briefly knocked out unshielded receivers across Chile and Japan. A rumble from something colossal powering on. A minute later, DSN's Canberra station reported a frequency spike at exactly 19.7 hertz. A harmonic pattern echoed
Signal
through
acquisition
the network, faint,
interrupted.
repeating, precise, not noise. A startup sequence. Something inside the craft was waking. As the hum continued, the temperature in the remaining fragments began to plummet. The jets weakened, the pulses slowed, and one by one, the leftover fragments, stripped to skeletal shells, drifted away like exhausted insects after completing a final task. They had been consumed, used, expended. The craft no longer needed them. Finally, as the last fragment dimmed into cold silence, the central object rotated its hull fully into view. A single, unified body. Seamless, mathematically smooth. No bolts, no cracks, no natural imperfections. It had the aesthetic of something ancient, not worn, but designed with a precision older than language, older than Earth, older than human comprehension. A craft built in the deep dark between stars. Dormant for millennia. Awakened only by the heat of Sunday, NASA's internal memo leaked that night contained 5 words. Prepare for a non-natural object. And still the most chilling part hadn't happened yet, because after minutes of silence, the craft stopped rotating.
Flag internal structural anomalies.
It angled its hull like a receiver aligning with a distant transmitter. And then a beam of blue light extended from its underside. Thin, sharp, directed. A signal.
Flag internal
ATLS
structural anomalies.
wasn't just awakening. It was calling something. Part 7 continues from the signal itself. The frequency, the direction, the horrifying realization
Flag
of where it was
internal
sending the
structural
message.
anomalies.
And the moment scientists understood, Atlas wasn't here to explore. It was here to report. The beam ignited.
The camera
so
switches to
suddenly that half
infrared.
telescopes
The
watching
red-yellow
Atlas
thermal
were
zone is
exposed to
evenly
sensors.
distributed
A
according
thin,
to the next
surgical
image.
ray of electric blue light shot out from the underside of the craft, not diffusing, not scattering, but holding shape with impossible precision like a laser made of ionized
The
gas
mass loss
and
is
magnetic
accelerating.
confinement.
We've gone
It stretched
critical.
for thousands of kilometers in a perfect line, and it wasn't pointing at Earth. It wasn't pointing at Mars, or Jupiter, or even deep space. It was pointing into the Sunday. Every instrument that caught the beam registered the same terrifying detail. The frequency of the emission matched the earlier pulses, the 0.7 on, 1, 4 off rhythm. A repeating cycle, a code, a message. And whatever Atlas was transmitting, the sun was responding. Not visually, not with flares or eruptions, but with micro-oscillations, so subtle only helioseismology labs caught them. Tiny harmonic shifts rippled through the sun's outer layers, like vibrations traveling across the surface of a drum. The beam wasn't just hitting the Sunday, it was being received. NASA's Solar Division ran emergency diagnostics. Every major observatory was placed on high alert. Internal memos, those that leaked, hinted at a phrase no one expected to see.
Blue pulse in T-9 minutes.
Possible bidirectional coupling. The sun wasn't a target. It was a relay, a transmitter, a gateway, a node in a network older than humanity. And Atlas was using it. The beam intensified. The surrounding dust vibrated. The remaining fragments, the lifeless shells, were pushed gently outward by the pressure wave of energy. But the craft at the center remained perfectly still, locked into
Feed
the solar
terminate.
vector with the precision of a communications array aligning with the deep space receiver. Then something even stranger happened. The beam began to split. One line became 2. 2 became 3. Thin branching filaments forked off the main beam, each one bending, curving, adjusting its direction with micro-corrections, as if searching for specific points. Telescopes tracking the angles realized the horrifying truth. The branches were aiming towards stellar coordinates, specific stars, specific systems, specific directions in the galactic map. The beam wasn't just signaling. It was sending multiple messages across interstellar distances. The timing matched what every astronomer feared. Atlas had reached perihelion, the moment of maximum energy, then activated. Now, with the fragments consumed and the craft fully formed, it was doing exactly what it was designed for, reporting in. Some messages targeted nearby stars. Others pointed toward regions with no catalog systems once. Dust lanes, dark spaces where nothing should be. Yet Atlas
We are
signaled
tracking
them
an object
anyway,
moving
like
at
it knew
incredible
something humans
speeds.
didn't. But the most chilling branch, the
Can you
one that
identify
appeared
it?
last,
Negative.
rose out of the beam and pointed almost straight upward relative to the ecliptic plane. Not toward a star, not toward a nebula, but toward a region 600 light-years above the galactic disk, a point of nothing, a mathematical void, a place with no known objects, no mass, no
Camera
light,
follows the path
and a
plunging
dress.
down to Atlas's
Astronomers stared at
perihelion,
the spectral
the blue light
analysis of the
slightly
beam
tweaking in the
and
direction
realized
of.
something sickening. The beam's encoding wasn't random. It was a handshake protocol, the same type of structured signaling satellites use when connecting to a network. But this network wasn't human or solar. It was somewhere else, and Atlas had just locked in. The sun oscillated again, slightly stronger, slightly clearer, as if acknowledging receipt, and suddenly, as if responding to some external trigger, the beam collapsed inward, not fading, not shutting off, collapsing, drawn back into the craft in a reverse cascade of light. The last branch folded back into the hull like a retracting limb. Silence
Atlas
returned.
initiation.
Cold, absolute,
Subject
terrifying.
canning.
Every observatory in the world watched the craft darken, its internal heat signatures dropping slowly at first, then rapidly until the object matched the temperature of the surrounding void. It had powered down. The activation was complete. The message was sent. Whatever Atlas was, whatever it was built for, it had accomplished its mission. And the universe, or something in it, now knew that Atlas had reached a star. For minutes, nothing happened. The craft drifted in silence, glowing faintly from residual heat. Then, it rotated again. Not randomly, not chaotically, deliberately. It turned away from the Sunday, away from the birthplace of its activation, away from the array of fragments that had fed it. Its longest span aligned with a single vector, the same direction as one of the outgoing branches earlier, a heading. The craft was preparing to leave. As telescopes watched, blue charges began to gather along its underside, swirling, tightening, accumulating like magnetic storms folding inward. Energy, building, charging. Not a jet, not a chemical burst, not anything that looked familiar. A propulsion system beyond physics, preparing for a burn. NASA, in a final attempt to maintain control of the narrative, issued a short statement. Object 3IATLAS appears to be dispersing. Observations inconclusive. No further comments. No one believed them, because the buildup continued. The hull vibrated. The space around it distorted not visibly, but refractively, as if bending the path of light. And then, the first pre-burn shockwave rippled outward. A pulse so powerful that dozens of telescopes temporarily lost tracking. It wasn't accelerating yet. It was spooling, like an engine ancient beyond comprehension preparing to fire for the first time in millennia. Every instrument on Earth recorded the oscillation. Every lab watching the craft froze. And a single realization formed across the world at the same moment. Atlas wasn't hurt. It wasn't deterred. It wasn't damaged. It was departing, completing the final stage of a sequence written long before humanity existed. Atlas had delivered its message. Now it was going somewhere, following its own instructions, its own destination, its own purpose. And no one, no agency, no government, no observatory could stop it. The pre-burn oscillation kept building. At first, it sounded like interference, a low rumble in the radio floor. But as the charge accumulated beneath the craft, the vibration deepened, tightening into a harmonic frequency that didn't merely echo through the sensors. It pressed into them. A frequency so steady, so pure, that it looked artificially generated the mechanical heartbeat of something awakening fully. Then the hull began to glow. Not brightly, not violently, softly. A faint lattice of blue light crawled across its surface lines, forming shapes, patterns, circuits, glyphs of a language older than Earth. Some observers compared it to the wiring of spacecraft. Others said it looked like the branching of neurons. But the most unsettling interpretation came from a spectral engineer in Germany. It looks like the craft is reading the space around it. For almost 90 seconds, nothing else happened. Just scanning, measuring, synchronizing. Then, without warning, the craft extended. Not physically, not through moving parts, but through distortion. A subtle warping around its edges, as if space-time itself was bending inward, pulled around the hull like invisible fabric. Gravitational lensing effects began to appear in places where no
Target
mass
acquired.
change had been measured.
Initiating
Stars
data
behind
scan
the
now.
craft shifted position by fractions of a milliarc second. A distortion that only one explanation could account for. Atlas was preparing to exit normal space. It wasn't simply going to accelerate, it was going to leave. The final pre-burn compression reached a critical threshold. All surrounding dust, even dust thousands of kilometers away, whipped toward the hull in a spiraling funnel, only to dissolve before touching the surface. Observers described it as watching matter being erased. And then came the burn. No flame, no flash, no plume. Just a single point of blue ignition at the craft's underside, so small, so impossibly controlled that for a split second most telescopes missed it entirely. Then the universe tore open. A shockwave tore through the void. A ring thin as a blade, expanding outward at thousands of kilometers per second, rippled through every sensor on Earth. Every instrument saturated. Every telescope blinked white. Signal boards across DSN centers flatlined. And then, instantly, Atlas was gone. Not accelerated away, not streaked across the sky, not moved into a new trajectory. Just gone. Vanished. No residual glow. No thermal signature. No gravitational tug. It left nothing behind but a fading ripple, a gravitational afterimage, like the echo of a door closing behind it. NASA tried to explain it as an observational anomaly. ESA called it data dropout. But every physicist watching knew the truth. Atlas had performed a maneuver outside the known laws of motion. It hadn't used thrust. It hadn't used propulsion. It hadn't used anything we understood. It had transitioned. To where? No one knew. But the direction of its alignment moments before the burn told the story. A coordinate. A vector. A heading straight into the void, into a region of the galaxy with no stars, no dust, no mass. A place that shouldn't matter. But Atlas had pointed straight at it. Somewhere in that direction, something had answered its message, and Atlas was going home. The final shockwave faded over the course of 8 minutes, long enough for nearly every observatory on Earth to recover their sensors. And after that, silence. Total, absolute, crushing. A silence that felt like the aftermath of a conversation humanity was never meant to hear. Within hours, agencies around the world began locking down data. NASA shut down their public servers. ESA encrypted everything relating to 3IATLAS. Private observatories were contacted. University researchers were asked, some politely, some not, to stop publishing. But silence couldn't erase what Atlas had already done, because the final fragment telemetry, retrieved by amateurs before the blackout, revealed something chilling. Atlas had never been a comet. It had been a delivery system, a seed, a messenger, a beacon, designed to lie dormant for millions, perhaps billions of years until encountering a star with the right energy profile. When it reached the sun, it awakened. When it awakened, it reassembled. When it reassembled, it transmitted. And when it transmitted, something replied. One last detail trickled out from a leak inside DSN's Madrid station, a detail dismissed as a glitch, then confirmed by 3 independent labs. For 0.43 seconds after ATLS vanished, a faint signal arrived, not from the craft, but from the direction it left toward. A tiny pulse, a whisper, encoded in a structure no one recognized, but containing one feature scientists could not deny: a timestamp, far older than Earth. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't random. It wasn't noise. It was acknowledgement. Atlas had reported in. The network,
I am sure
was,
that this is the final
receipt.
solution.
And humanity had
Let's send the
accidentally
results and
witnessed
wait for the
activation
confirmation.
of an interstellar system that did not originate here. A system older than our Sunday. A system that was never meant for us. A system that may still be active. Because the final horror wasn't the message, or the craft, or the burn. It was this. Atlas was designated 3I, the third known interstellar visitor ever recorded by humanity. If this was the third, where were the first 2 now? And how many more are already drifting towards stars across the galaxy, waiting for their moment to wake?